Before we get too deep into the technical content, I want to take a few moments and justify our use of Bootstrap. After all, not everyone is a fan of Bootstrap or CSS frameworks in general. There are many web designers and developers who simply believe that CSS frameworks tend to be bloated because they offer so many styles and features that you'll probably never use on your given project. So you're transferring all this additional information that's not even required for your specific website every time one of your pages are requested. Instead, they believe that you could and you should create the styles custom for every website that you build. That would include things like the media queries, the layout system, everything custom for every site that you work on. And on the one hand, that sounds great. I mean, that would be awesome. But there's always this big caveat, and that is if I had all the time in the world and I was working for a really large company, it was well funded, and we had a very visible web property, and that was one of the requirements, then absolutely, that would be awesome. I would take the time and I would handcraft each and every style that's used specifically for our web application, making sure that it's optimized for our site. Even if that means I can save just a few fractions of a second off of every request, if I can save a few bytes here and there, on a large web property that's expecting a lot of traffic, sure, that can make a huge difference long term. However, I rarely work on extremely visible web properties for large companies that are well funded. And as a software developer, I'm more pragmatic, and the types of applications that I'm asked to work on don't need that degree of precision and that degree of optimization. I can get spectacular results quickly by simply including a reference to Bootstrap in my website and then adding a few additional styles as needed. Now, again, if the company that I'm working for needs something like I described earlier, then chances are they're probably going to hire, graphic designers and web designers who are well versed in creating those styles of frameworks and CSS. So typically that will be taken off my plate anyway as a software developer. Bootstrap really does have two ways that you can use it. So we'll call them two workflows. The first is to just use it straight out of the box with no modifications to Bootstrap whatsoever. No modification. All you're doing maybe is adding a few additional styles on top of the ones that are already there. But then there's a second workflow where you're actually taking the SAS source code files and you're modifying them, then running them through the SAS preprocessor to compile down your changes to the CSS, and it's customized specifically for your liking for your website. And so this whole argument about customization really becomes moot with regards to Bootstrap, because if you want a really tailored CSS, then you can start with Bootstrap SAS files. You can remove the parts that you really don't need. You can change it as much as you like, and then compile a streamlined version for your needs. So at least in that scenario, Bootstrap would provide a starting point. You don't have to start from scratch. You can utilize a lot of the thought process that's gone into it and then just take out the parts you don't need. But let's assume for the moment that you're interested in that first workflow that I talked about, where you're using Bootstrap just right out of the box. And actually, that's what we're going to be demonstrating in this course, frankly. Even if you're just going to use Bootstrap's default styles and you're not going to make any changes in the SAS and compile it down and all that, then Bootstrap still makes a lot of sense, because many times application developers are simply building intranet applications that are only accessed by internal employees or by a very small set of customers. So in these scenarios, Bootstrap is more than adequate for providing a high degree of style and functionality with very little effort. And furthermore, using the default Bootstrap files, the unchanged Bootstrap files, you do get a huge benefit through the use of content delivery networks, a CDN, to minimize or eliminate the load time for that file. So in many cases, if you're sharing the same content delivery network for a Bootstrap file or some other CSS or JavaScript file, and if other popular websites are also using that same source for their CDN, then the files will already be cached in the viewer's web browser from their previous visits to those other popular websites. So instead of it an optimized file, which you could probably pare down to a quarter of the size of Bootstrap, let's just say, for example, you could utilize the full Bootstrap and not take any penalty because your user is just going to be pulling up the cached version of the bootstrap.css and the bootstrap.js files from their local cache. All right, so there are some options with regards to referencing a CDN and then falling back to a local in case the CDN is not available. Don't really want to talk about that just now, but there are some options. Maybe we'll talk about those near the end of the course. So beyond performance considerations, Bootstrap also implements best practices for CSS3 and other front-end technologies, which really is a culmination of years and years of experience that others have and they're putting into this product that I don't personally have. So those best practices, honestly, they seem to change weekly as far as I can tell. It's difficult to be an expert at everything, so maybe we just let somebody else be an expert at that and they pour their heart into it and we just benefit from it. So I like the fact that I can rely on those who are keeping up with those changes so I can focus on my application's business functionality. And finally, to that point, I like the fact that Bootstrap is open source, which means there's a lot of people looking at the code, not just me and a few other developers in my organization who are working kind of in a bubble. There is a large body of developers and designers who are contributing and testing the code. They're offering fixes and suggestions for improvements. So if you do choose to build your own CSS framework specific for your project, then there's an ongoing maintenance cost associated with it. You have now just obligated your company or your client to supporting that homegrown solution for the life of that project. Again, given how quickly things change on the internet, that's no small consideration in my book. I personally like the idea that I can outsource that part of my application to those people who specialize in front-end web development. So yes, there's an inherent risk to relying on an open source project, especially an open source project that was created and maintained by a company that's cost investors billions of dollars so far and yet to show a single dollar as a profit. I hope Twitter can stick around and make this continue to work, but let's suppose that they don't. I think Bootstrap's going to outlive Twitter, quite frankly. Now, whether you use Bootstrap on a given project or not, that's completely up to you. It's merely a tool, and you always want to choose the best tool for the job. So it might make sense in some cases. In other cases, it might not make great sense. But there's no doubt that employers will expect you to know this tool. And you'll need to know it well enough to be able to use it on a given project or to be able to maintain a project where it's already been used. So no matter what, you need to know Bootstrap. There's no getting around it. All right, so in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at a quick overview of the changes that are coming in Bootstrap 4, and so we get a scope or an understanding of the purview of the changes that are coming in the next version. So we'll see you there. Thanks.